All right, well, this evening we're going to shoe Standfast, and it's been, I didn't write it down on the calendar, but it's probably been about 2 months, maybe 2.5 months since he was shod last. So it's time to take him to the barn and reset the shoes. Well, whoa. Whoa. Oh. He likes to go to the barn. This video is especially for Charles. Charles was here a little while ago, and he's like, I can't find anybody to shoe my big draft horses. And he's like, Titus, I want to learn. He's like, when you shoe again, take a video of it. So it's for you, Charles, and for anybody else that wants to learn to shoe. I like to put them in the cross ties for shoeing. You don't have to, but for me, that's what I like. So if you want to shoe your own horses, I highly recommend that you build or buy a box where your tools are kind of up and easily accessible. I used to shoe horses with this box that was really low, and I was always bending down really far to try to fish out my tools, and my tools were all piled up on top of each other. So it's worth the investment to buy a box, or worth the time to build you a box, but very important. Let me check here. I think my knife is a little bit dull, and it's not too bad, but let me see if I can find a chainsaw file here. The sharper the hoof knife, the safer it is. And for those of you that don't know, there's a right-handed knife. This is a right-handed knife. There's also left-handed knives. With your hoof knife, you only want to sharpen it from one side. So there's like this really flat side, and then there's this side with the bevel, and you only sharpen it on the one side. Now there is sometimes a burr that forms on this other side, so sometimes I do just go on the back side just enough to take that burr off. I used to put the nails in my mouth to hold them, I don't recommend that. Like, you're working with the horse's hoof, and the horse's hoof has manure, and then you're reaching up there to your mouth to get the nails, so possibly you could get parasites that way. And then if you have them in your mouth and you were to get thrown on the ground, which happens from time to time, if you're shoeing unruly horses, then it could be dangerous. Okay, so we've got nails that were driven up this way, and then they were bent over to form a clinch, like that. So the nails came up, and then they were bent over. Okay, maybe it's hard to see with the camera. What we're going to do is we're going to use this clinch cutter, and it's basically a chisel on the one side. And so we're going to put it right there, and then we're going to hit with the hammer there, and that's going to take the clinch, and that's going to turn that clinch up so that it's no longer bent over. It'll just be coming straight. So it's important that you have a mallet. You can use your shoeing hammer, but it'll mushroom this, and it doesn't work as well. Using your shoeing hammer on this does not work as well as a mallet. So this is like a, I'm not sure what the substance of this is called. Do you know, Jonah?
It's a plastic.
Some kind of a plastic. Yeah. Some kind of a synthetic. And so you don't want to use the mistake of using your nippers to pull your shoes off. It's very important that you keep your nippers sharp, and so we will use the pull-off tongs in order to pull it off. So we'll lift up his hoof. And then it's hard to see from the camera probably, but we have a nail that's kind of turned over that way. So now we're going to, now it's sticking straight up. We'll just go all the way around. Alright, and this is called the hoof pick, and we start here and we move towards the toe.
You found a frog.
Yes, there's a triangle shape structure here called the frog, and it's very rubbery. And now take our shoe pullers. First, I think I'm going to roll up my sleeves because they kind of get in my way sometimes. So now we got our hoof pullers. And let's just start here. You want to kind of work it like if you were to get this side loose and then you were to jerk it all the way over like that, you could crack off one side of your hoof wall over here. Or if I were to take it this way and I were to get this side loose and then I was just to jerk it over here, it could chip off this side of the hoof wall. So it's important that you loosen this side, but then you also loosen this side. And now it's kind of evenly loose. So we're equally loose on either side. And then we're pulling it towards, kind of down and towards the toe area, like that. And don't just throw it down because it could be hazardous. So it's a good idea to just hang it on your box. Now I'm going to use the back of my knife because I don't want to dull it, and I'm going to clean the dirt off with the back of my knife. Okay, now that I have most all dirt off, then I'll use the sharp side a little bit. So some people are like, well, how do you know how deep to go? You know, you don't want to cut until you hit blood. And other people are afraid of hitting blood, and so they don't take off enough. And so if you don't take enough of the toe off, that can be a problem too. So there's you can take stuff off the sides of the frog, and that's good. That'll help reduce the possibility of thrush. But you don't really want to take a flat cut all the way back. You want to just take it off the sides, and then you could take off a little bit off the top. But mainly, you just want to focus on the sides. So, once you've trimmed your frog back, here's the point of your frog. And if you're up, like if it, on a level plane, like sighting it from here, if you're about 1/8 of an inch or so, or 3/8 of an inch above this point, then you're not going to hit blood. But if you're like completely even with that, the point of that frog when you're cutting here, then you may end up hitting some blood. It's not so much of an issue if you hit blood here in the toe area. They won't feel it. They have no nerves there. But if you cut too deep here in the frog, they can bleed and 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 bleed. So it's kind of a balance between, you want to cut off enough toe, but you don't want to cut off too much. You don't want to get into the blood. Okay. So usually, especially with a horse that's like pulling logs or pulling a wagon, you want to have a fairly long heel and a fairly short toe. Now with riding horses, like a Tennessee walking horse or foxtrotter or something like that, you want to have maybe a little bit longer toe and less heel. So if we look at the angle of it, if the more toe that you cut off, the steeper its angle it's going to be here. The more heel you cut off and the more toe that you leave, the more it's going to be like duck-footed.
Flat.
Yeah. So when they're too flat-footed and they have too low of a heel and too long, the heel is too low and the toe is too long, then there's a ligament back here. And that ligament, when the toe is too long and the heel is too low, that ligament can get like too tight and too strained. And so it can cause issues for them. So it's important, in the wild, they're running around on rocks and sand, and so their toes never get really long. And so that's not an issue. But, if you have a horse that's out on soft pasture or they have shoes on for a really long time, then this toe gets too long, and then it can cause them pain or some issues. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to trim your horse's hooves or shoe them on a regular basis, like every 2 months. Some people will tell you that you need to shoe them every 6 weeks, or and for work horses, I don't feel that that's necessarily true, and it does vary. Some horses grow a little bit faster than others, but for my horses, it's usually once every 2 or 3 months that I'm going to take the shoes off, trim them, and then put the shoes back on. So for a front hoof, you're going to put the foot in between your legs, and you're going to point your toes in just a little bit, and that'll help you. So you can see I'm barely taking any heel off at all. And then I'm going to cut. This will really develop your grip strength. Okay.
All right.
Yep, you can see that's close to 1 inch that we cut off. Cut off about 1 inch. So when we cut this off, there's like hard to see from the camera, but there's this is kind of like mounded up right here. And this area is called the sole. This section here is called the sole. Maybe hard to see in this lighting, but you have your sole, and then you have a white line, and then you have the hoof. And the hoof, this or also horn, is the same substance as like a cow's horn, or the same substance as your fingernails. And this hoof wall is made up of like a tube, like thousands of tubes of air. So similar to like a rubber tire is filled with air. And you can see there's just a little bit of blood there, which he doesn't feel that. And if you do happen to cut down to that, don't be super concerned about it. It will quickly quit, and it's not going to be an issue.
So you have two sides to that file.
Yes.
A rough and a fine, right?
Yep. I use the rough side mostly. So we're going to sight down it, and it looks like we're pretty even. It's challenging because sometimes you'll accidentally cut one side down a little too lower than the other. So you want to just check and make sure that you've got both sides completely even. And then for the right side of the hoof, there's like a sharp edge here. I'm holding my rasp like that. Now I've got that rounded off. And then for the left side, I'm holding it in my left hand like that. Okay. Now, this white line, after you rasp it, will kind of pooch out a little bit, and so it's important to take your knife and cut that down, because if that's pooched out higher than your hoof wall, it'll be spongy, and your shoe can work itself loose. So you cut that off. Now, this shoe was put on new, then it was reset once or maybe twice, and this may be the third time that I'm putting it on. And so sometimes when it's on for a while, you'll have this little bit of movement, and so the nail holes will wear bigger than what they are originally stamped out to be. And so if you clean your nail holes out and then you put your nail in and it just easily comes out, then that can be a problem, because if your nail hole is too big, then your nail will just kind of wobble around in there. There'll be a little bit of play in it, and then your nail will just wear a little more and a little more and a little more, and eventually your shoe will come loose. So these nails seem like they're pretty good the way they are, but you can see like this nail at the toe, I put it in there, and then now see how easily that falls out. It's better if you can put your nail in, push it in with your finger, and then you shake your shoe, and if it stays in there, that's the ideal. That's what you want to see. So see this one here, I cleaned it out, and now I'm shaking my shoe and it's staying in. So that's more the ideal tightness right there. So we were just looking at how our nails fit into the shoe, and there was this one was decently tight, but this one over here was easily coming out. And so if your nail holes have worn bigger, you can do one of two things. You can go to a bigger nail. I don't really like to go to a bigger nail. The bigger nail isn't always best for the horse. So what I typically do is, if the nail hole is worn a little bit too big, I'll go to the anvil and I'll beat it right over top right there, and it'll squeeze it together just enough to where that nail will sit in there. So what happens, you can see how the nail tapers, and so if the nail hole is too big, then you have that, then the nail goes up higher into the hoof, and it can cause more pressure on the hoof. So, but if you beat it too much and you close the nail hole up too much, then your nail will stick out like that, and then on gravel and things it'll get worn off. And then once your nail hole, your head gets worn off, then your shoe will be loose. So there's a fine balance between closing your nail hole up enough that it grips the nail correctly, but you don't want to close it up too much. So let's go over to the anvil, and we'll see if we can adjust the holes a little bit. So all these nails were just a little bit, you can see that nail hole is a little bit bigger than that one, but it wouldn't hurt to close up all of these just a little bit. So I'll start with this one here, and I'm not hitting it completely flat like that. I'm hitting it with the edge of my hammer like this. I've had people tell me that, Titus, your shoes stay on, and the other guys just fall. They fall off in a few weeks. And one of the reasons why, when I put a shoe on, that it stays on like it should, is I'm paying attention to these small details about the sizing of the nail hole. Okay, so now we're going to check it again. Now that nail sticks out just a little bit. Now I can shake it and it'll stay in. That's what you want. You want to be able to shake it vigorously upside down, and it should stay in there. So we're good on this side. Okay, I'm happy with that. It may be hard to see in the camera, from the angle of the camera, but there's actually a groove that's been worn into the metal, so that our creator designed that hoof to be able to expand and contract. So it expands and contracts like that motion, and it will wear a groove in there. Now, when we sight down it, this one heel is sticking up higher, and this side is down lower. So we're going to make sure that we hit it in the right spot to where we bring it up where they're both even. and you don't want one side higher than the other. It needs to be a perfectly level plane. And then we probably changed the shape just a little bit while we were hammering it, so we'll check it with the hoof and see. So this has drill tech on it, and they use it for drilling oil and wells deep in the earth. It's like carbides that are brazed on. And if you're using the horses on pavement, asphalt or concrete roads, and when they're pulling a load, they have no traction without this, and they'll slip out and they can hurt themselves. Or if you're galloping a horse or cantering a horse on the blacktop, if you don't have this, they can slip and fall and hurt themselves or you or both. This drill tech is very important. It'll make your shoe last longer. One time there was a 40-horse four-wheel drive tractor with a bucket, and he was pushing snow and he got stuck, and my horses were able to pull him out of that because they had this drill tech on. So it was icy and snowy on the road, but they had good traction because of this drill tech. So drill tech is a really good stuff. But when you're leveling your shoe, you don't want to be beating the drill tech, because it'll wear the face of your anvil, and then your anvil won't be smooth anymore. It won't be flat anymore. And so I'm always careful that I'm not actually beating. And if you beat the drill tech there, it can crack off. And so I have the drill tech here and I have it here, but it's not actually on the face of my anvil. And so when I'm beating my shoe, I'm careful as to where that drill tech is, because I don't want to crack the drill tech off, and I don't want to damage the face of my anvil. And an anvil like this runs probably about $400 right now, maybe $500, and so you want to take care of it. So for a front hoof, you keep in between your legs, you point your toes again like we mentioned earlier. I cut him a little bit too deep, but they don't feel it, and it heals up really quickly. So if you push on it and you feel like it's kind of rocking back and forth, you want to make sure that it's not rocking back and forth. If it is, like if one heel is longer than the other, then when they put the weight on it, it'll strain one side more than the other, and it'll work itself loose. Another thing that's important is, I'll get to that point in just a minute. So there's a checkered side on this nail, there's a smooth side on this nail. If you put the checkered side pointing towards the frog, then the nail will go in and it'll curve out the side, and that's what you want. You want the nail to go in, and then at the right time you want that nail to come out. I'm bending that nail till it's about 90 degrees, and then I'm taking the hammer and twisting it, and now it's off. So I'll put another nail this side. A little light taps, it'll kind of go straight in, and if you hit it hard, it'll tend to curve out. So you do little light taps, and then once it's almost all the way nailed in, then you hit it hard, and that'll make it come out. Now, if you get it wrong, and you have the checkered side out, then that nail will just go in and it'll curve more and more, and it can go into the quick or the alive part, and that will hurt the horse. Horse can get infected, and it can be very, 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 very harmful to the horse. Very important that you pay attention to which side your nail is, which way it's turned. So if you are, if your nail is leaning too far in, for instance, if your nail is like leaning this way, it'll come out and it'll come out really low, and it won't grab much of the hoof wall. So if all your nails come out really low, your shoe will not stay on as long. But if you angle it too steeply this way, like see how it's angled more like that.
Frog.
Yeah, if the head is away from the frog and it's like angled that way too much, it'll go in and it won't come out. So you won't. There's a balance, and so some places the hoof wall is really steep and you want to angle it more this way. Other places the hoof wall is more ducked out and you want to angle it more this way. So maybe that's a little hard to explain, but so at the toe it's ducked out this way more, and so at the toe you can usually angle it this way more. Over here it's more, the hoof wall is more steep, and so if you were to angle it in this way, since the hoof wall is steep, it won't even come out the side like it's supposed to. So here, where it's steeper, you tend to angle it this way a little bit more. Here at the toe, where it's ducked out, you'll tend to angle it more this way. Okay, and then this is called the clinch block, and you hold it right where that head has been rung off, and you'll tap it about 4 times really hard, each nail. That bends it a little bit, and it tightens it. Okay, now you see how the shoe fits even with the edge of the hoof wall here, but then over here it sticks out a little bit. If it sticks out too much and it's sticking way out there, they can accidentally step with their back hoof and catch it right there, and then they'll pull it off, or they'll pull one side down so it's not even. So it's important that it's not sticking out too far out that way. But if it's all the way even right in there, it doesn't leave room for it to expand. So when he's hitting the road and he's trotting, this expands, and so you want to leave room for that expansion. So it's very important that you leave some sticking out here at the heel. You just don't want to have a huge amount sticking out. Sharp rasp was for cutting the hoof down evenly. This is a dull rasp, and the dull rasp I use around the metal. So it's important to take the dull rasp and you rasp underneath each nail head, or the end of the nail here just a little bit. That forms a little pocket or a little bit of a seat for your clinch. And then that way, when you bend it over, it'll lay flat in there and it won't stick out as much. It's a smoother, neater clinch. This is called clinchers. Some people call them alligators. Looks a little bit like an alligator. So we take it here and now it's bent over. Now it's clenched. See how
It'll pull it down.
it pulls it down, yep.
Yep.
And then they're sticking out just a little bit, so I take the smooth side of my rasp. You don't want to rasp them like too far down, but it kind of smooths it off a little bit. If they do happen to hang their shoe in the fence a little bit, and you file these down some, these will just bend up, and it won't tear the hoof much. If you don't rasp these like I'm doing, then they can like chip, the whole thing can tear off if they happen to hang it in a fence. And so it's a good idea to rasp these some. They don't need to be, you don't need to rasp them, the clinches down like too far where it kind of weakens them. But there's kind of a happy medium.
I have a question.
Yes.
How much is recommended for the nail to stick it out? When you are nailing, how much is good?
If you had that much sticking out, that would not be very good, and the shoe it wouldn't be biting enough, wouldn't have a hold of enough hoof to stay on very well. And if you just barely have anything sticking out, that's a little bit too high.
Mm-hmm. Like half inch is good?
Yeah, if you would have about that much of the nail sticking out, would be about the
It's kind of a
ideal.
sweet point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, good question, Miguel. Okay, well, maybe another day we'll do another shoeing video, but I guess this is where we will close. Are there any other thoughts or any other questions?
No.
So, maybe to close, some horses, they get scared when you pick up their hoof, and they're not always trying to be ornery. They just, like, they think in terms of like, oh, like what if a dog comes after me, or what if a coyote comes after me, and so they feel vulnerable when they have one hoof up like that, or they get tired and they don't want to stand for so long. And so once the horse learns to be calm in its environment, and once the horse learns to trust you, then like he's so easy to shoe. You know, he's not jerking around. He's just very calm and accepting of it. And so it kind of reminds me of how with our Heavenly Father, we may be in situations where we're really afraid and we're unsure, and so people may misinterpret what we're doing as that we're uncooperative or that we're this or that. We may misinterpret the horse and think, oh, the horse is just being ornery, or the horse is just being difficult, or the horse is stupid, or the horse is this or that. It may be that we're misunderstanding that the horse is just afraid of the situation that it's not used to. And so we may be in situations where we are afraid and people may misinterpret what's happening. But when we learn to trust our Heavenly Father, then things will go differently and things will go so much smoother. All right, well, God bless you, and just keep reading your Bibles and working with your horses, and you will not have any regrets there.